Thousands of years before the events of Skyward Sword, goddess Hylia sent a piece of Hyrule's surface up into the heavens. On it was the sought-after Triforce along with the remaining human survivors of a great war, kept safe, out of reach from the genocidal wrath of Demise and his fearsome demon tribe. As a final measure, Hylia created a powerful barrier that would separate heaven and earth, before turning her attention back to fighting Demise and ultimately sealing him away for the time being. Over the next millennia, the residents of the sky built a new civilization, with its own unique culture, fashion, customs, and beliefs, and the island itself came to be known as Skyloft. So what we have here is a group of people who lived out their entire lives completely isolated for thousands of years. Generation after generation, everyone they knew and would ever know was born in the sky, and in the sky they will breathe their last. Nevertheless, Skyloft is a sprawling town. The people are content, and as expected from an isolated civilization like this, there's a strong sense of community. All seems well in Skyloft, and for the most part it is, especially compared to some of the other cities, towns, and villages from past games. But there's a few haunting details about Skyloft that inhibits a Village of the Year award. Events which, despite Skyward Sword's relatively tame approach to horror, are still pretty unsettling when you dig further into the implications, themes, and possible real-life inspirations for it. In today's video, we'll cover two subjects for the price of one, and as a bonus we'll even discuss the possibility of a connection between these two seemingly disconnected events. These speculations don't have to be true by any means, and as per usual are probably me overthinking it, but hey, if it makes for a more spooky story, all the better. With that said, happy Halloween, and let's dive into the curious case of Skyloft. Many, if not all of the youth on Skyloft will study at the Knight Academy at some point in their lives, where they will learn to master their Loftwing and are taught the ways of the sword until they graduate as knights. Individuals who are tasked with keeping order and protecting the island and its people until the next generation comes of age. As of the time of Skyward Sword, there's a total of 7 students who live and train at the academy, Link and Zelda included. Other permanent residents include 2 instructors, Horwell and Olin, and lastly the school's headmaster, Gapora, who also happens to be Zelda's father. Additionally, there's 2 individuals who are often present at the academy but don't actually live there. The graduate student Pipit, who acts as a sort of role model for the younger students, and Henya, the school's cook. However, there's one more occupant at the academy, and I'm not talking about the cat, an entity unseen by most yet whose voice can be heard echoing through the hallways after nightfall. The chilling, haunting sounds of someone in pain or some sort of emotional distress. The first person to take notice of the eerie voice is Henya, who swears that during the late hours she keeps hearing a voice coming from the restroom right next to the kitchen on the first floor. But instead of being creeped out by it, her attitude is one of annoyance as opposed to fear. The other staff never mentioned the voice from the restroom, probably because their rooms are on the second floor. As for the students, only Link himself and Colin seem to be aware of it, and in the case of Colin it's because Link tells him about it. He then goes on to refer to this mysterious individual as the weirdo in the restroom. It seems both Henya and Colin assume that it's just a normal person who locked themselves into the restroom for some reason. But as most of you know, this individual is anything but normal. When Link finally gains access to the restroom at night, the source of the creepy voice is revealed to be that of a ghostly hand reaching out from the bathroom stall. One who, for unknown reasons, is calling out for paper. To those who've played Oracle of Ages or Majora's Mask, this will no doubt be familiar, as it's not the first time that we find a mysterious hand reaching out from a bathroom requesting paper. It's become sort of a weird recurring theme in Zelda. However, one thing that sets the entity from Skyward Sword apart from the other two is that thanks to Fi, we have some substantial information about it. We know that it's an actual ghost, that it's a young woman, and that it's a being who harbors unfulfilled desires preventing it from moving on to the afterlife. We even have a name, that being Feeney. Now, the origin of the name Feeney is actually quite interesting because this was never established in the original Skyward Sword on the Wii, in part because no NPC ever mentions her by name, and the dialogue box did not display the name of whoever it is you were talking to, something that was changed in Skyward Sword HD. However, the name Feeney was already hinted at long before the HD remaster of the game on Switch. Its first appearance comes from an official strategy guide from 2011, also known as the Skyward Sword Prima Official Game Guide, where it is mentioned in the chapter about side quests. The name would later show up again in the Zelda Encyclopedia 7 years later. And finally, Feeney was confirmed to be her official name in Skyward Sword HD. Oh, and in case you're wondering, her Japanese name is similar, that being Feeney instead of Feeney. Most of you who played Skyward Sword will no doubt be familiar with Feeney, as she's part of a pretty famous side quest, or at least she can be depending on the choice you make. It's one of only a few side quests in the series that have two different outcomes. One of Link's classmates, Colin, will ask him to deliver a love letter to Coraine, one of the girls from the academy he has a crush on. If you do, it'll result in Colin getting rejected by Coraine in favor of the older graduate student, Pippet, and in this outcome, Feeney will tell Link to forget about the paper, says her goodbyes, after which the haunting at the academy seems to stop. However, you can also give Colin's letter to Feeney instead, in which case she gives Link her thanks, and here too ceases to haunt the bathroom. It's not until later that you realize that handing Colin's letter to Feeney has led her to develop feelings for him, and in what is perhaps one of the most cruel and disturbing fates ever seen in a Zelda game, she has now latched herself onto him like some sort of supernatural stalker, causing poor Colin to have nightmares maybe for the rest of his life. Now, that is dark. So, with all that said, who is, or should I say was, Feeney? Why and how did she pass away at such a young age? And what caused her to linger and haunt a school bathroom? It goes without saying that we'll probably never know for sure, as none of these questions are ever answered in the game nor in the books. However, this is a ghost story, and just like ghost hunters in real life, we can just make stuff up for views. So, the main consensus about Feeney's name is that it's based on the word phoenix, a fictional bird from Greek and Chinese mythology, which does make sense in the context of the English version of Skyward Sword. With the exception of Link himself, Zelda, and Batro, all the NPCs in town have names derived from birds, be it the name of a bird or the sound they make. Pigeons, hens, geese, owls, seagulls, and so on. As such, I believe that Feeney was most definitely a former resident of Skyloft and not from the surface or some other place. The fact that Feeney was young and that she haunts the school in particular points to her being a former student at the academy, one who tragically lost her life at a young age for reasons unknown. Despite the cruel fate she bestows upon Colin, she doesn't seem to be an evil or vengeful spirit, but more so sad or lonely. She herself clarifies that she's not angry. She calls Link a kind soul after giving her the letter, and her feelings for Colin seem to be genuine, and the nightmare is more of an unfortunate side effect of her presence as opposed to a malicious act. So what could have happened to her? Was it murder? Self-inflicted? Or maybe just a tragic accident? And what's up with her request for paper? In order to get a general idea, let's take a quick look at a few real-life inspirations for Feeney's story. One which has been brought up a lot as an inspiration for Feeney is Hanako, the angry spirit of a girl who is said to haunt school bathrooms. She's kinda like the Japanese equivalent of Bloody Mary in the sense that she needs to be summoned, often as part of a dare by young students. The summoning involves going to the female bathroom, usually on the 3rd floor, knocking 3 times on the 3rd stall, and then asking if Hanako is present. There's many variations on Hanako's origin, her death, and the unfortunate fate that befalls her victims, but I think you can see why this story in particular is so often referred to as the most likely inspiration for the events in Skyward Sword. According to Miyamoto, the character of Feeney was indeed based on Japanese ghost stories and urban legends like this, but not necessarily on one specific story. And there's actually quite a few Japanese tales and myths besides Hanako about a ghost or demon haunting a bathroom. There's Akamanto, for example, a masked spirit who appears in public toilets or school bathrooms. Once again, the stories vary, but one aspect that stands out is that the Akamanto will ask the bathroom's occupant if they want red or blue paper, and the only way to survive the encounter is to completely ignore him and run away, as both choices lead to death. The last one I want to mention is the ghost story of Okiku, a maid who worked in a samurai mansion and drowned in a well, either by her own doing or because she was killed by her master, depending on the version of the story. After her death, Okiku's spirit comes out every night into the mansion and breaks out into a terrible howling and sobbing, causing her former master to go insane. There's no specific mention of a bathroom, but the nightly howling and sobbing as described in the story does somewhat resemble that which we hear in the academy. Whichever story Feeney is ultimately derived from, it's all based on the same Japanese concept. The idea that a person's spirit, or reikon, will leave the body upon death. It then goes into purgatory where it awaits a proper funeral and post-funeral rites to be performed so that it may join its ancestors. However, if the individual died suddenly or violently, the funeral rites are not completed, or if they are influenced by powerful emotions such as desire for revenge, love, jealousy, hatred, or sorrow at the moment of death, the reikon is believed to transform into a yurei, a spirit who continues to exist on Earth until it can be laid to rest. past, either by performing the missing rituals or resolving the emotional conflict that ties it to the physical plane. According to Fai, this is exactly the case with Feeney as well, an unfulfilled desire that keeps her from moving on to the afterlife. Some types of yurei like the Onryo and Goryo are considered vengeful and dangerous, but most are harmless or mischievous at best. There's even a specific class of yurei who are seductive and desire a relationship with a living human. Although Feeney does indeed fall in love with Colin, I don't think this was the initial cause and motivation behind the haunting. If anything, it extends the haunting even further. The fact that she doesn't move on indicates that whatever kept her on the physical plane was not resolved in any way. As mentioned before, the most likely option is that Feeney used to be a student at the academy back when she was alive. Not only because of her name, but oftentimes yurei will haunt a location or individual they are familiar with or have an attachment to. In this case, the school. That and the fact that all young people in Skyloft study at the academy at some point in their lives, even those who are not particularly brave. I investigated every house in Skyloft to see if I could find anything that could link Feeney to one of the people or families living here in the current day. Maybe a picture of a girl who doesn't appear in-game, or even an extra unused bed, anything really. But alas, as far as I'm aware, no such evidence seems to exist. The only mildly interesting thing I did find is that there are two unused character concepts for Skyward Sword who are both young and female, and neither have a definitive name. However, since they were never actually implemented into the game, it's impossible to know if one of them correlates to Feeney, and realistically speaking, they probably don't. There's also no mention of a student who died while studying at the academy, not by the school staff or anyone in town for that matter. Henya, who first encounters the haunting, is said to have been taking care of the students at the school for the past 25 years, and she doesn't recognize the voice in the bathroom, nor does she bring up any tragic tales of missing students or anything of sorts. As such, I believe that she probably lived and died in Skyloft a long time ago, perhaps in the early days of the institution or even before it was established. The fact that no one mentions or even remembers a young woman whose life was cut short definitely points in that direction. As for the way she died, my best guess would be an unfortunate accident. It's made obvious by the knights and the academy staff that flying a loftwing, as awesome as it may be, is not without risk, and there's quite a few rules and restrictions in place to prevent unnecessary harm or casualties, like no flying after dark unless you receive special training, no interfering with other riders during a race, there are knights who patrol the skies in case someone falls off the island, and advanced techniques and maneuvers like the spiral charge are only allowed to be performed by senior students who have mastered high-level flight skills. However, if there's anything we know about human behavior, it is that rules and security measures are often put into place after something goes wrong first. So perhaps in the early days of the academy, one of the students met a tragic end due to an oversight while flying their loftwing, resulting in their death. Another option I've considered is that since the academy has allegedly existed for only 25 years, it's also possible that Feeney died much longer ago, and that her house once stood where the school is now, and so the haunting is actually not related to the academy at all. Anyway, that wraps up the story of Feeney for now. So let's switch gears to the second part of the darker side of Skyloft, the demon Batro and his influence on the town. From a lore standpoint, Batro is one of the most intriguing characters in the entire Zelda series. Not because of who he is, but more so what he is. A demon who's been living in hiding at the bottom of Skyloft, though, interestingly enough, a friendly one. Now, I'm not going to get into the finer details about demonic entities in Zelda lore because that's a whole nother topic on its own, but in short, they are usually portrayed as evil and associated with the so-called tribe of demons who oppose the gods. Batro may just be the first and only time we've encountered one that has no ill intentions. Not only that, but it's also the first time that a demon is capable of transforming into a human. There's a lot of mystery surrounding his origin and how he ended up in Skyloft in the first place. After all, the whole reason the island was sent into the sky by Hylia was to keep the surviving humans from being slaughtered by demons. It's possible that Batro was originally one of Demise's followers and essentially became a stowaway when Skyloft was lifted up into the heavens. This would mean that he's been living here hidden away from sight for thousands of years, and his friendly nature could simply be the result of him being cut off from his tribe for so long that he gave up on his evil ambitions and desired to become human. I mean, he doesn't really have much of a choice here. This is definitely possible and probably also the main consensus, but there's also an alternative. While Batro is most certainly a demon, we know that not all of them are born this way. For example, Vati used to be a Minish and then transformed into a demon later in his life. And even Ganondorf was once nothing more than a thief, a mortal, albeit a powerful one, who became a demon when he obtained a piece of the Triforce. hours, so anyone could feasibly transform into one given the right circumstances. And this concept falls in line with the Japanese shiryo, someone who slowly transforms into a demon because of repressed feelings of jealousy, hatred, grief, or sadness. This being can be a spirit, but it can also happen to someone who's alive. As such, it's possible that Batro's original form is that of a human, one who transformed at a later stage of his life. It would explain how he knows it's possible to turn back into a human again in the first place. His fashion also matches that of the residents of Skyloft, though this could also be a failed attempt at a disguise so he can mingle with the people in town. It's clear that Batro is lonely and, well, who can blame him? He's been living in hiding for who knows how long, and any attempt he's made to connect with the people of Skyloft resulted in fear and panic. It's not until one of the kids from town goes missing, who's later found hanging around his house, that he finally meets someone who isn't immediately terrified of him. Despite his good intentions and friendly demeanor, the very nature of him as a demon has an unfortunate side effect on the town above though, one which he doesn't seem to have any control over. It's revealed that the mere presence of Batro, his aura so to speak, is directly responsible for some of the crazy stuff happening in Skyloft after nightfall. Not just the various monsters that show up, but also the sinister shift in the behavior of one of the animals in town that roam the streets at night. The adorable cat-like pets who keep the Skyloftians company seem totally normal, but after sunset they are suddenly overtaken by some sort of rage, making them hostile and honestly kinda scary. To the people of Skyloft, this transformation is a complete mystery and seem to think that it's just part of their nature. Little do they know that the source lies right below their feet. After finishing Batro's side quest and transforming him into a human, the remnants cease to become enraged, and the many monsters no longer appear on the streets at night either. It kinda makes me view demons in the series in a different way. I mean, even those who don't want to hurt people cannot help but cause problems simply by existing. And it also makes me wonder if guys like Vati or Ganondorf can still be redeemed after all. But that's another story altogether. With all that said, let's finish up the video by exploring one final question. Is it possible that the two phenomena, Batro and Feeney, are somehow connected? While the two events seem separate, there are some similarities to be found as well. Both occur at night. Each involves a being who has unfulfilled desires. And both entities have possibly existed on Skyloft since even before any of the current day residents were alive. There's also the fact that Batro lives right below the graveyard and has even marked one of the graves with a demonic symbol. Could this be Feeney's grave, perhaps? And did Batro's influence lead to the resurrection of her spirit, intentionally or unintentionally? I mean, maybe. If Feeney's return from the afterlife is indeed due to Batro's influence, it could even explain why she asks for paper. In Japanese culture, there's a thing called an ofuda, a sort of paper talisman sometimes used for purification or to ward off an evil presence. Maybe Feeney wanted to free herself from the demonic influence that's keeping her here. Of course, on the side of the developers, the whole paper thing is probably just a recurring gag and nothing more. Hence why I said that today's stories are most definitely me overthinking it. But like I said, it's part of creating a spooky narrative. Another correlation between Feeney and Batro I've been contemplating is not that of a demonic resurrection, but instead a personal connection. I mean, think about it. We have a girl who clearly died at a young age, and a middle-aged looking man who could have transformed into a demon at some point of his life as opposed to being born as one. And as I explained earlier, this can happen due to powerful, oftentimes negative emotions, which also include sadness and grief. So what if Feeney was either related to him or at the very least someone he was friends with, and the emotions over her loss led to him becoming what he is today, a sorrowful demon longing for friendship and restoring his humanity. And that concludes this year's Halloween episode. A quick shout out to Big Deal Blake for becoming a Patreon, and to all of you for your continuous support, viewership, and generosity. You are all amazing and I cannot thank you enough. I hope you have a great Halloween, good luck with them pumpkins, and don't forget to always check your candy for something dangerous or gross. I will see you all in the next video. This is Don signing off, and have a good one.